Welcome to the Ultimate Token Studio and Figma Variables setup video, where we look at how to set up a one-brand design system in Token Studio, sync those with our Figma variables. And one thing we're going to look at as well is the naming conventions and what goes into each of our different collections. So starting off with our brand collection, looking at things like spacing, color, radius, so on and so forth. Before we look at our alias collection, so our alias color categories and how we map the colors in our brand collection through to our alias collection. And then finally, the same with our mapped collection. So how we take the colors in our mapped collection and translate those into all these different branches of our design system. So looking at things like the text colors, icon colors, so on and so forth. One thing I would like to also call out is we do have our design system tracker Figma plugin now available on the Figma plugin store. Be sure to check that out. But let's dive right in. To start off, let's talk about the different collections that we like to have in Token Studio Figma variables. Now, whether you're using Token Studio with Figma Variable Sync, Token Studio Solo, or Figma Variable Solo, these will still apply. So on the left here, we have Token Studio, and on the right, we just have a screenshot of the collections for Figma variables. And again, you can sync them together. So there's three main collections that we have: our brand, our alias, and our mapped. Now, which are which? So your brand is the central source of truth with all properties and colors specific to a brand. So this is beyond just colors, but also includes your border radiuses, spacing, and much more. And again, we'll touch upon all these other items later on in this video. That then translates into your alias collection, which is also usually specific to just colors, and it helps define which of your brand colors are primary, secondary, neutral, so on and so forth. And again, we'll cover what alias entails later on. And then your alias collection will translate into your mapped collection. And mapped, we can usually take the form of both a light and dark theme. And this takes your alias colors and applies them to different text, surface, border, and icon categories. And there's a couple other ones that we can throw in here as well. And these are the colors that are generally selected by your designers. Next, let's look at a little bit of a visual as to how these all tie together. Whenever designers come to me and saying they're having a difficult time wrapping their head around the concept of collections and how the different collections relate to each other, I always like to show them a diagram like this, where we have our brand collection, which you might also call your global collection. I just like to rename it to brand. You have your alias collection and then your mapped collection. Now, your brand collection represents the roots of a tree. You know, a tree can't grow without super strong foundations. And your roots are really just the basics. You know, what are your purple colors, what are your red colors, what are your green colors, so on and so forth. As you haven't really dived too deep into any of the naming conventions yet, which we'll get to in a later part of this video. So again, you're really just naming the foundations. Your alias collection, is what connects your brand collection to your mapped collection. So it offers a nice segue into all the different branches that your colors and tokens and variables can branch out into. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. Now, if we look at it from the point of view of the UI collective brand, you know, we have this purple. We also have a red, again, very common across every brand for things like error states. And then we have a green, again, also very common for things like success states. Now, we need to be able to know, and designers need to be able to know, what our primary color is. You know, you don't want a primary to be a red if it's not in your logo or it's not often used in your brand. So what we actually did in our alias collection is we defined our primary color as that purple. So you're going that next level up in terms of naming. Again, to continue, our red, we're defining that as our error color. Again, you don't want an error color to be a success. You don't want any mix up there. And then we're defining our green color as our success color. So now that we have that next level up in terms of our naming, what we can do on our mapped collection is map those out into a ton of different branches and what these colors can actually be used for. So as an example, a primary color could become a text action. Our error color could be an icon error, a surface error, a border error. And our success color or token variable can become our border success, an icon success, or a surface success, so on and so forth. So you're really starting with the foundations, going that next level up in the alias collection in terms of categorizing your colors, like what they are used for. And then in your mapped collection, whether it's light or dark, is you're branching out those colors into all of your different specific use cases. Next, let's look at the individual specifics around naming conventions and best practices. All right, so now let's look at some naming conventions associated with our token and variable, brand, alias, and mapped collections. One thing that's important to note here is there is no one-size-fits-all approach. What I'm going to show you here is something that we found works really well for us, works really well with a lot of other designers as well. But again, every single brand, design system, and designer is different. Everyone has different preferences. Let's just keep that in mind. So let's start off by looking at some naming conventions associated with our brand collection. Now, your brand collection tends to house a little bit of everything. It's not just specific to colors, which is the case with your alias and mapped collections. So let's start off with our brand spacing. So spacing would be things like your padding, your gap, and this is the scale that we tend to follow. So it's our extra, extra, extra small, then to our extra, extra small, and then all the way up to our extra, extra, extra large. And again, we go from 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12, so on and so forth. One thing that's important to note is, as I mentioned before, every single designer and design system is different. You don't always need to go from 24 to 32. You might go 24 to 28. Again, it depends on what your objectives are with your brand and how your design system is originally set up. But this here serves as a really great foundation. Next, when we look at color, there's two approaches to color. So we have the first approach, which is what we have done with our design system, where it's not using numbers, which is the case with approach 2. So it's red lightest, red lighter, red light, all the way to red darker, and you can even have some red darkest, red lightest as well. This works really well if you don't picture your color scale changing too much. Whereas with approach 2, maybe you want a color in between red 100 and red 200. So red 150. So if you picture your color scale changing a lot, if in the future, approach 2 is really dynamic. It offers a lot of flexibility because you can add different colors in between color combinations and just use a different color as well. Next, we look at our brand radius. So again, our corner radius here. So we always like to have an option which keeps things nice and square, and then that slowly progresses all the way up until you get that little pill shape. So it's at a 50%. So we have our none with the 0 pixels, our extra small of 2, our small of 4, our medium of 8, and our round of 50% corner curvature all the way around. Next, we go with our border width. So again, we have an element with no border width. Then we have a small, medium, and a large of 4. And then we look at typography. So we're starting off with our body. We have our extra, extra small, our extra, extra small link, our extra, extra small semi-bold, and that goes all the way down the line to our large. You're probably asking is, why didn't I include sizes here? Is font sizes is a very touchy subject, and that in alone could deserve its own video. So I just included the naming here for now. And again, that's the same case with our heading as well, where we start with our extra, extra small all the way to our hero. And one thing that's important to note here is you'll notice that our extra, extra small for our body and heading, they're different sizes. And that's as intended. You want your heading to be a little bit larger than your body. Next, we have our font family. So we like to have our primary, our secondary, and our caption. And there's a ton of different items that you can put here as well. And again, it's really reflective of your individual preferences and your brand. Then we move into our line height body. So again, this the space between lines of our body text. So starting with our extra small of 16, our small of 20, our medium of 24, and our large of 28. And then the same thing for our heading as well. So this case, our extra, extra small is 24, and all the way up to our hero heading, line height heading, which is of 56 pixels. Now let's look at our paragraph spacing. So of course, the space between our paragraphs. So we have our small of 14, our medium of 16, and our large of 20. And then lastly, we have our text decoration, which we like to have just an underline. Next, let's look at our alias collection. Now let's look at our alias collection, which really is just colors. So within our alias, we tend to have different color categories. So we have our primary, our secondary, our neutral information, success, warning, error, and highlight. One thing that's important to note is you want to connect your alias collection to your brand collection. So you're not building out a whole set of new colors within your alias collection, you're pulling them down from your brand. Let's dive a little deeper into this. So if you look at our primary color, again, maybe for the UI Collective brand, so our primary color would be this purple here. In our brand, we would just set these as purple, but we want to define this purple as our primary color. So our purple in our brand will become our primary and our alias, our purple light in our brand will become our primary light in our alias. Our purple dark in our brand will become our primary dark in our alias. So we're taking the same colors, but just applying whether they're primary, secondary, so on and so forth in our alias collection. So we're not mapping them to individual elements such as a text or surface yet. Again, we're just defining what are our primary colors, what are our secondary colors, so on and so forth. Next, the same for secondary. Our pink would be our secondary color, so we're going to name that to secondary in our alias collection. Our pink light would become our secondary light. Our pink dark would become our secondary dark. Same for neutral. Our gray would become our neutral. Our gray dark would become our neutral dark, so on and so forth. Our information, your information color tends to be some type of shade of blue. So our blue would become our information. Our blue light would become our information light. Our blue dark, information dark, all the way down the line. Same for success as well. Again, a success wouldn't be a color, something like red. So of course is a green. So our green would become our success, our green dark, success dark, so on and so forth. I'm sure you guys get the drill by now. Same for warning. Our orange would be our warning color, our orange dark, our warning dark, orange light, warning light. Error, you don't want your error color to be a green. So our red would become our error in our alias collection. And then lastly, we tend to only have one highlight color. So in this case, our yellow would just get mapped to our highlight. But again, if you do have a highlight light, a highlight dark, that's totally fine as well. This is how we have done things with our design system. There we go. So next, let's look at our mapped collection. All right, now let's look at our mapped collection. And again, your mapped collection, this is where it takes your alias collection and it spirals out into all of these different branches. So for things like your text and your surface, your border, your icon, so on and so forth. So let's start off by looking at text. This would be a really good chance to take a screenshot here because I know this can be quite complex and confusing and you might want to reference it a little bit later. So when it comes to your text, here are some examples of items for which you might want a color specific to your text. So a text headings color, a text body color, a text action color, disabled, highlight information, all the way down the line. Now, I know this is going to be confusing, so let's look at our text body to start. So in our brand color, we had a gray darkest, and then we mapped that to our neutral darkest in our alias. And now in our mapped collection, we are defining this color as our text body because it's a nice dark gray. Again, you don't want your text to be something like a white, unless it's on a black background, of course, a real vibrant color that's real difficult to see. So hopefully this makes good sense as to how we're starting off with our brand collection, mapping our gray color to a neutral color, and now we're mapping that to a mapped color. So we're defining its role in the overall design system as the color for our text body. Let's look at icon. Same thing applies. So you might have a color for your icon primary, an icon information, a success, warning, error, which are really good for alert states, or alert components, excuse me. So let's start off by looking at an icon information. So in our brand, we just had this blue. In alias, we mapped this to our information color. And now we're defining this information color and we're setting it to our icon information in our mapped collection. Let's look at surface. Surface, there's always a ton of different types of surfaces that you might have. Again, so a surface for a page, a surface for your primary color, for your secondary color, for an error, a warning, an information, and on hover, a ton of different things that you can do with your surface colors. So for now, let's look at our surface primary. Again, if we're looking at it from the point of view of the UI Collective brand, we might want our surface primary colors for things like our buttons to be this nice purple. So in our brand color, this was simply just our purple, which we defined as our primary color in our alias. And now we're saying this is our surface primary in our mapped collection. Let's look at border. So border, very, very similar. Let's look at our border primary. So with our border primary, again, if we want to look at it from the point of view of the UI Collective brand, this nice purple is our primary color. So just like in surface, we started off with our brand, our purple in our brand collection. We mapped that to our primary in our alias collection, and now we're defining it as our border primary in our mapped collection. So I hope all that makes sense. Again, if you have any questions or comments relating to this, I know this can be really complex. Feel free to leave those in the comments. I'll be sure to reach out to you. But next, let's look at actually building out our tokens in Token Studio and mapping them to our Figma variables. All right, so now comes the part of this series, or part of this video, where we're going to work on actually building out our tokens, or some of our tokens at least, in Token Studio, syncing them with Figma variables, and then we're going to build a component using our tokens or our variables. Now, before we do that, one thing that a lot of people usually have questions around is building out, your color scale. And you might have seen this in another one of our videos, but let's just build out a super quick color scale together. So I'm going to use, let's say this is our UI collective purple, and let's go to in either direction. So we're going to have a purple dark and then a purple light. There we go. Maybe let's just offer some differentiation between them just to give ourselves a little bit of a visual. So this one here is going to be our darkest purple, our darker purple, our regular purple, which might be our primary, purple light, and then a purple lighter. One trick that does seem to work when building out color scales, and again, there's a ton of tools out there that allow you to do this relatively simple. If you don't want to use them, however, here's a nice trick. Is what I do is I put a rectangle here to the right-hand side, and then I simply just drop the opacity. Again, if we're going lighter, so 75. Then I take this right here, this rectangle, and then I color match. So I can see that this is the new color code, set this back to 100, and then change. And then going one shade later, lighter, I drop this to 50, take color match. There we go. See, this is my light. Change, set that back to 100. So now I see I have a nice, even, going lighter color scale. Now, if we're going dark, what I can do is set this to black. Same type of thing. Drop this to 75. Color match. There we go. Pull in the color code. Set this back to 100. There we go. And then set this to 50. Color match. Grab the color code. Set this back to 100. And then change our background back to white. Get rid of this. And there I can see we have a nice, even color scale. So these are the colors that we're going to use when building out our tokens in Token Studio, which will, of course, sync with your Figma variables. And we'll look at that next. All right, so now that we've got our color scale here, let's work at actually transferring everything into Token Studio so we can sync with our Figma variables. If you're not using Token Studio, that's totally fine. The same type of concept naming and how we do things is very similar in your local variables. So no need to worry right there. Everything translates just fine. So what I'm going to do is actually open up Token Studio to start. And we're in a new file. And what I can do is I can rename this to brand. But if we do that, it kind of limits ourselves looking forward. You know, you might be only working with one brand for now. It might be a single brand design system, but who's to say that doesn't change in the future? So what you can do is then maybe just start fresh here is you can go brand/default. And what that does is it creates a folder where you can stick all of your brand tokens within. So say down the line, you do want to add another brand to your design system, you have the ability to easily do so. Let's also create our alias, default, and then our mapped light. And again, if you did have a dark theme as well, then it would be mapped dark. So now what we're going to do, and again, we're going to start with our brand for now, and we're not going to add every single token. At the end of this video, we're going to build a button component together using our tokens and variables that we synced. So as part of that, we're really only going to focus on our border radius tokens and our color tokens. But now that you're familiar with the naming conventions, I'm going to show you how everything works here. You'll be able to build out the rest of your design system, hopefully just fine. So let's go into our default, and let's start off with our, we'll go with our border radius to start. So what we're going to do is radius dot none. And we're going to set this to 0. Again, if we think back to our naming conventions for our border radius, this is essentially saying that we want a nice square edge for our border. Now, you might be asking, is why did I put radius dot none and not just none? When you're working with design systems, and we have a video on this as well, if you're a longtime subscriber, is when do you use component level tokens? Is, you know, sometimes you really do need to have component level tokens because you can't figure out a combination that works, and that's just fine. So what the radius.none does is it separates that none into its own section, which would be radius. So if I do need to go through and add component level tokens, what I can do is I can say radius component. So it's a component level token for our radius dot input. Input, I'm going to set this to, I don't know, 2. So now I can see we have all our generic border radiuses here, which are used for everything. And then say I do need to have component level tokens that are very specific to a unique component, like an input. It goes in the radius component subfolder. So it's really just a way to categorize things. So let's then go add a new token for radius dot extra small. Let's set that to 2. And then we'll go another one. Again, we'll only do a couple. Radius dot small. And we're going to set that to 4. There we go. So we got our radius, our extra small, and then our small 4, and then a radius component for our input. So it's really that simple when it comes to adding things in Token Studio. It's not very complex. It's just the how to structure things and connect things, which is what trips a lot of designers up. So we have our border radius. Let's now go through and add our brand color. So what I'm going to do is, again, following the structure here, just make sure to copy this. Let's start off with our purple lighter. Oops, wrong spot for it. Our purple lighter. There we go. Let's add another one for our purple light. There we go. Let's add another one for just our purple. There we go. Let's add another one for our purple dark. Copy the hex code in. You can add in some descriptions here as well. And let's get another one with purple darker. Copy this in. Beautiful. So now I can see we have our colors here. So now that we have just some standard colors and we have our border radiuses grouped out into the different subfolders that we see right here, next what we're going to do is let's look at mapping these down to our alias level and then to our mapped level. All right, so next let's look at mapping our colors down to our alias level. However, before we do that, one mistake that I did make, I am human, is I didn't put these into a subfolder. Now, you can put them into a ton of different subfolders. It could be a subfolder specific to the color. It can be overall, specific to a theme, but we're just going to put it into a subfolder called color for now. Yep, that's fine. Yep, there we go. And let's edit that. Let's add color back on top. Purple lights. Let's go color.purple. Add that token. Let's go color purple dark. And then let's go color purple darker. Purple darker. There we go. So now I see they're in a little bit of a better spot. So now that we've got that all set up, what we can do is let's go through and map these to our alias collection. So alias collection, let's do something very similar here. And this, we'll start off, let's say our primary. We'll start off with our primary actually. So let's go theme.primary. And let's go just our color purple. See, what we're doing here is we're not mapping them, like copy and pasting the same hex codes here, is we're tying them back to your brand color. Again, think of the tree diagram. Right now we're in our tree trunk and we're connecting them to our roots. So our color purple is our theme primary color. Again, the primary color for our theme. Great. There we go. And I can see that that's as such. And now let's go primary light, theme, primary. Oops, can't type today. Primary dash light. And this is going to be our purple light. Again, still tying everything back. Theme, primary, lighter. There we go. Let's create. Let's then go the other way. So primary dark. Set that to our purple dark. add a new token, our primary darker, oops, and let's tie that back to our purple darker, color purple darker. Hover over, quick check, color purple light, color purple lighter, color purple dark, color purple darker. So what I did again is I just tied our Alias collection colors back to our brand default colors. So if I was to change one of those colors in the brand folder, all of these colors would change with it, and you don't need to go through and change the color in the brand and then the alias and then in your map theme. So again, if you're working with really complex design systems or any type of design system, really, connecting all of your collections together allows a change on one to make a change on all. It's very similar to a component in Figma. So I hope that starts to, really resonate with why we connect all of our different collections together and then how to connect our collections together and how simple it really can be. Next, let's look at the same thing, but for our mapped theme, or mapped collection, excuse me. So now that we have our alias collection set up, let's work at translating just a couple of these alias tokens down into our mapped collection. One thing that's important to note right off the bat is something I see all the time is design systems where they have 10 or 15 shades of one color. You don't always need to find a specific role in your mapped collection for all of those colors. It's impossible to do. Sometimes you might have 15 shades of one color, but you're really only utilizing 3 or 4 on a regular basis. So try not to overcomplicate your mapped collection. Focus on the lowest number of colors possible. Don't try to overdo it. So let's start off at our light. And we're just going to add 2 surface colors again, because we're just going to build a button component. So we want to build a button component that has one surface token and then a surface token that will show how the button can change when it's hovered over. So a surface action and then a surface action 1 hover. So let's start off with surface. Again, always categorize it. Action 1. Oops, I didn't even connect the token, excuse me. And one thing that's important to note here is I see here, and something where designers get tripped up with a lot, is they actually, when they're in their mapped collection, they tend to tie things back to the brand collection. Like they skip over alias. So I can see here our brand is everything that has color in front of it, and our alias collection is everything that has theme in front of it. This is where it's super important not to accidentally assign something back to your brand color, because then you're skipping over alias entirely. So here I am. I'm going to assign our surface action 1 to just our theme primary. And now let's do the same, but for our hover, surface 1-hover. And I'm going to set that to our theme primary dark. So I now have a surface color for our button and then a surface color for our button component when it is hovered over. And again, these are tied back to our alias, which are tied back to our brand colors. So again, think of the tree structure. What we've done is essentially we've connected all of our color tokens together. So a change in our brand color will change our alias color and will change our mapped light theme color. Next, let's look at actually syncing our token studio with our Figma variables before we go and build a button component. All right, now let's go ahead and sync our tokens with our variables, but we need to set up our themes first. So under Theme Manager here, what I'm going to do is manage themes and see that I don't have any themes created. So what I want to do is create a specific theme for everything that falls underneath here. So let me toggle these off, and I'm going to add a group, which is going to be our brand -default. Set this as such, and you always set it to enabled. Why not source? I'm not too sure. It actually just doesn't work. And then I'm going to save that theme. There we go. So now I can see a theme set to brand default. Turn on all these colors as well. Let's go manage theme, new theme. We want a alias default. Create new group. It's going to be our alias default. Toggle these off. Set that to enabled. Save that theme. There we go. Turn this on. And let's go another one. Let's go mapped lights. Anyway, I'm not going to do one for mapped dark because we don't have any colors in there for now. So turn this off. Let's create a new group. Let's call it mapped-light/light. Enabled. There we go. So now I have 3 themes for each of our different collections. Now, if you're not on the paid version of Token Studio, you won't be able to do this. In order to sync with your Figma variables you do need to be on paid. What I can do then is select Create Variables, and I can see that some collections and variables were added. Now, if I open up my local variables, I can see I have an old collection here. Let me just delete that. Oops, delete that collection. Delete that collection. There we go. Where I now have our brand, again, with our radius tokens, our radius component specific tokens, and all our colors. I have our alias tokens, and I have our map tokens. It's really that simple. Next, let's look at building out a component using our tokens. Now that we have our tokens built out and synced with our Figma variables, let's go ahead and tie it all together and build one button component. So let's start off. Let's just add some text. Let's call it button, and that's fine. What I'm going to do then is I am just going to right click and add auto layout, or you can press Shift A, and let's add a quick fill and select our surface action 1. One thing you'll notice though is that I still have the ability to select my brand colors and my alias colors. And again, because you've mapped them to your mapped collection, that's not always required. So to simplify that, you can do something called scoping. So you're going to scope your variables. So you go into your brand as an example, select your color, edit those variables, and then select, deselect show in all supporting properties, but you can also just do it individually. So whether you don't want it to show in fill or stroke, so on and so forth. And then I can do the same for my alias as well. There we go. Alias, edit those variables, deselect. And now I only see I have the option to select my mapped collection. So it's a real easy way to adjust. And I don't have a text variable yet, so I'm just going to manually add that for now. And there we go. Let's create the component, call this button. And there you go. We have now successfully built out our tokens, synced those with our variables, and now built a component.
What's going on, everyone? Thanks for watching today's video. Just want to encourage everyone to sign up for our Slack community at uicollective.co. And we did also just launch our design system tracker Figma plugin. So it's a plugin that helps you identify components, styles, and variables that you're using in your designs that are not associated with your design system. So it saves a ton of manual effort having to go through your designs and look for those inconsistencies. We are in free public beta right now, but that'll change over the next week, next month or so. So be sure to check that out. See you at the next video.